What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange on a painful Tuesday morning. Prayers up for Cam Akers. You guys know this was my guy. This was our guy. We both loved him. He was my RB6 in redraft. He was my RB5 in dynasty. So this one hits close to home. Apparently, Cam Akers, if you guys haven't heard the news, has torn his Achilles while he was training. So if you guys are unaware of Achilles tears for running backs, it is a very, very, very steep road to recovery.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a brutal kill for Cam Akers. And before we're going to get into the dynasty, the redraft outlooks of both him, Henderson, this Rams offense, how we should really expect things to transpire. But I'll tell you right now, if you look at the data on torn Achilles, a lot is against Cam Akers when you're talking about odds in his favor or against him. There's really been no success story of a running back in particular coming back from Achilles tear. So before anybody goes in and says, oh yeah, buy this guy for the cheap, make sure you study up on these reports because this is actually like brutal.
Right. And we were looking pre-show to see if we could find the actual data on it. If I find it, I will link it in the description if you guys want to go check it out. But if you think of recent years, we've seen guys like Orleans Darkwa and Deontay Foreman, and these guys have experienced Achilles tears. And Deontay Foreman is probably the best example that we have to go off of because I think he was a rookie running back when he experienced it, right? So he was a very young player, much like Cam Akers is a very young player. Cam Akers, I believe, is 21, 22 years old right now. So age is in his favor for the recovery. And apparently, from what I've seen on Twitter from, fantasy doctors and stuff, they're saying there's some kind of advancements in the surgery for Achilles tears. So maybe there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope there. But Deontay Foreman was unable to really make an impact in his NFL career because of the Achilles tear that he suffered his rookie year. So that is the severity of the injury we're dealing with. This could legitimately be career ending, really, from a fantasy perspective. I'm sure he can get back on the field and play in the NFL, but from a fantasy perspective, his hopes of being, what I thought he could be, the RB1 in fantasy or a top 5 running back in fantasy, probably gone now.
Yeah, and I woke up this morning to a call from Corey, like, dude, Cam Akers just tore his Achilles. I literally woke up, made my coffee, and said, okay, let's go fucking record our reactions on it. This is just absolutely atrocious fucking news. Again, you're probably not going to find a higher channel on Cam Akers, both from Dynasty and Redraft, than the FSE Boys. So this is basically like we lost our first son. This is absolutely brutal.
Yeah, so all that being said, we got to get into the fantasy implications. So if you own Cam Akers in Dynasty, and I'm sure there's plenty of you out there that do, because we told you to trade for this guy. We told you to draft this guy at turn picks and stuff. So we apologize for that. Obviously, we can't see the future and know that, he was going to tear his Achilles. But if you have Cam Akers in Dynasty, you're probably wondering what you should do next. Should you sell him? Should you hold him? If you don't own him in Dynasty, should you go be buying him for cheap right now because the owner's panicking? Here's what we talked about pre-show. Basically, if you can get any kind of high value assets in return for Cam Akers, if you can get another running back in the tier of David Montgomery or Miles Sanders or any of the rookie running backs or something like that, I would sell Cam Akers. And if you can get a first round pick for Cam Akers, I would sell Cam Akers. If I can't get anything of that realm of value, I would probably just hold the guy.
Yeah, I agree. Again, like I wouldn't just panic sell him for a 2 or a lower, like a freaking 9th, 10th round running back just because I'm panicking. Like, no. There will be a point in the offseason where somebody believes, oh, I got to go buy low on Cam Akers. And buying low is still, in their head, a first-round pick, David Montgomery, that type of player. So if you can get that type of package, as Corey mentioned, sorry, I just lost my voice mid-fucking sentence, that's what I would do. Now, it fucking sucks. This is a guy who I had ranked as my RB5, Corey as well, who I had to do the drop in my rankings, RB23 now in Dynasty.
Yeah. And this is a 21-year-old running back who was set to see a huge, workload this year. It obviously sucks. So what at wide receiver, what kind of value could you get for Cam Akers, do you think? If you were going to sell him straight up for a wide receiver right now, do you think somebody would be willing to give you, I'm just looking at a tier right now, would somebody be willing to give you Cortland Sutton, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, even a guy like Rashad Bateman? Would you be willing to sell him for potentially that low?
I'd probably say the cutoff, looking at my dynasty ranks right now, again, I got Jeudy as 65th overall player. Cooper Kupp's probably like the final guy I would probably even consider, and he's my 67th overall player. So if that gives you guys a better idea of what type of value we're looking at, that's probably what we would be looking at. This actually single quarterback. So,
and if you guys think we're being dramatic, I seriously can encourage you to go check up and read up on some Achilles, injuries in the past. And I saw somebody responded, but didn't Adrian Peterson come back from an Achilles? No, it was an ACL tear. So ACL tears and Achilles injuries are completely different things. ACL tears are pretty routine surgery for running backs, and it's relatively simple for them to come back. It's a long recovery, obviously, but the process is a lot easier than an Achilles tear. We legitimately have no example of a running back that has come back from an Achilles injury and produced even as like an RB3 in fantasy, let alone an RB2 or an RB1.
If Cam Akers had torn his ACL, he would probably drop from RB5 to like RB9 in my rankings and in Dynasty. Like, in all honesty, like, he wouldn't face a severe drop because, I mean, we freaking saw Saquon Barkley tear his ACL last year. He's on track to play this season.
We've seen Dalvin Cook tear his ACL in the past. We've seen guys tear their ACLs all the time. It's really not that big of an injury. So, again, we're not doctors, so we'll stop talking about the doctor implications. Obviously, from a redraft league perspective, we need to talk about the other guy in that backfield. And Darrell Henderson is a guy that, and I'm apparently the fantasy reaper. I know Andy Holloway of the Fantasy Footballers has that nickname, but I literally put out a video yesterday talking about handcuffs and backup running backs. And I was talking specifically, if the starter goes down for the year, who is the best, handcuffs in fantasy? And Darrell Henderson ended up being my RB7 on my list. And one thing that I was concerned with about Darrell Henderson is if anything happened to Cam Akers, and now we obviously have that scenario playing out, I just don't think Darrell Henderson's very good. I don't think he's a very good running back. So the talk that, and I've seen it already, is Darrell Henderson an RB1 in fantasy, right? Because Cam Akers was an RB1. He was being drafted as an RB1. He was going to get the workload. He's in a great offense with a great offensive line, great play caller, high red zone rushing attempts. Malcolm Brown vacates all the receiving work, right? All the same arguments apply to Darrell Henderson. But the difference between Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers, in my opinion, is I actually believed Cam Akers was a very talented player. Now, Darrell Henderson last year ranked number 33 in tackles avoided per attempt and number 35 in yards after contact per attempt. So as a runner, and going back to his days at Memphis, I never thought he was that good of a runner of the football. He's a guy that's big and fast and can run very fast. And he legitimately had what was like 2,000 yards at Memphis because he just had like 10 yards per carry and a bunch of breakaway plays. That's the type of player that we're talking about with Darrell Henderson. The bright side about Darrell Henderson's talent is the fact that he ranked number 4 in yards after catch per reception with 10.1, number 2 in PFF pass blocking grade, and number 31 in yards per route run. So this is a guy that can contribute as a pass catcher, which was a concern for some people with Cam Akers. It wasn't for us, but it was for some people. And that pass catching work should be all Henderson's now, unless they sign somebody. Obviously, there's a good chance they do sign somebody for depth, but I think Henderson, from a pass catching 3-down workload standpoint, he's going to be all alone there. The only question I have is, what can he do with that workload?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Again, when we were looking at Henderson last year, like, he's still in the games he actually started as the main back, contributed somewhat in the passing game. He got 40 receiving yards, 16, 30. Like, he was doing more work in the receiving game than Akers was. Now, I don't think that would have been the case this year, obviously, but this is still like a decent back. I expect him, again, to be a high upside RB2 type of archetype, but the people that are putting him in the RB1 range are just overlooking the fact that there was a reason why Cam Akers was starting over this guy. There's a talent gap. There's a talent discrepancy. And while this is a great situation, forcing guys that are suboptimal players into great situations don't make for great second-round picks in fantasy football.
Right. And the second-round range is what we're going to get into, right? Because when you have that kind of workload that he's projected to have right now, it's going to be very hard to get a value on that player. If you're in drafts, if you're in underdog drafts, if you're in your home league drafts, people are going to see the workload. They're going to envision the ceiling because of the workload, and all the points that we made about Akers, like I said, with that, they still apply, right? The goal line work, the red zone work, all that still applies. And Danny mentioned the game logs of Darrell Henderson. There was like 7 games where Cam Akers was dealing with a rib injury and a high ankle sprain last year, and you could see that Darrell Henderson got the workload. But when you actually look at what he produced with that workload, it was fine. It wasn't RB1 level numbers. It wasn't superstar running back numbers. It wasn't league winner type numbers. It was, mid-level RB2 numbers, which is exactly, and we can talk about this right now. Where do you have Darrell Henderson ranked?
He is currently going to be, I just adjusted my ranks. He's currently going to be my RB17.
And this is redraft we're talking about first. Yeah. We'll talk about Dynasty in a second, but from a redraft perspective, I have him as RB18. The guys I had directly in front of him are David Montgomery and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So more kind of similar type of players are like, workload guys that I have questions about their talent, basically, is the same kind of tier that I have them in. I would still take, a number of guys like DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, all these guys I would still take over Darrell Henderson next year. And then, of course, the top end guys like Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, all those guys I would take over Darrell Henderson as well. So once you get into the, Miles Sanders range, like that's when I'm willing to take a guy like Darrell Henderson. In terms of my overall rankings, I have him overall at 40 right now. So a late or early fourth round pick is about where I have him. So
I have him at 44, dude. I have him at 44. The guys directly in front of him, we're looking at a huge wide receiver run from 36 to 42 with Evans, Godwin, Julio, Kupp, Ayuk, Moore, Woods. Then I got Kyle Pitts right in front of him. So he's at 44 for me.
In my rankings, I currently have Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, David Montgomery, Lamar Jackson, Julio Jones, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Those are like the players immediately ahead of them. And right behind him is guys like Brandon Ayuk, Patrick Mahomes, Miles Sanders, Chase Claypool, Kenny Golladay. So that's basically where we both see Darrell Henderson as a guy that you want to be drafting in the late third, early fourth round, assuming, guys like DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins are already off the board, because I think we both agree that we would take both of those guys over Darrell Henderson, because we believe in the ability of those players a lot more. He's going to be an interesting case study, right? Because there's going to be people that have him, RB12 or something on the season, and they're going to take him in the mid-second round. And to me, I can't willingly pick him for a player that I don't really believe in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, I've already seen people, as you mentioned, ranking him as an RB1, toting the untapped upside. Like, he's going to be, like, as much as we talk about Joe Mixon, he's going to get that type of hype this offseason. Oh, he's going to get all the touches. His offense is going to be good. But is the player that good to warrant those touches is what we got to wonder. So overall, again, are we really ruling out that they bring somebody else in? Are we really ruling out that they bring in an Adrian Peterson, a Le'Veon Bell type to really tap into this backfield? Like, I think fantasy football is going to be in for a rude awakening if they sign any of those guys, because everybody's going to be rushing to their phones, rushing to their computers, getting on their underdogs and drafting this guy in the second round right today, because that's how fantasy football works.
Right. And like you said, I think talent supersedes everything, right? We saw last year, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire had come out and, been awesome and been phenomenal, they never signed Le'Veon Bell. And I will take that to my grave. There's no way they would have signed Le'Veon Bell if Clyde was giving them everything that they hoped for when they drafted him in the first round. They signed Le'Veon Bell because Clyde was disappointing the coaching staff. That's why they signed Le'Veon Bell. So if Darrell Henderson goes into the season as the full feature workload, they signed nobody of note in the offseason. By week 4, if he's averaging 3.6 yards per carry and, 7 yards per reception, who's to say they don't sign Le'Veon Bell or Devontae Freeman or whoever else is on the waiver wire? Shit like that happens when you're not that talented of a player. It makes you sleep at night a lot easier when you know that you're drafting a player with this talent and the ability to keep his job once he has it.
Yep, absolutely agree. So when we're talking about Darrell Henderson and Dynasty, I actually have him one spot ahead of Cam Akers right now. Listen, if the history on Achilles Tears wasn't as extensive and as brutal as it is, Cam Akers would easily be ahead of Darrell Henderson. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't expect Cam Akers to return to full-fledged workhorse type ability that we thought he'd be able to assume this year, we got to have Henderson higher than him. We have to. I mean, it would just be a fugaz if we tried to rank Henderson below Cam Akers, given the state of affairs currently going on with that backfield.
Right. And if you think about best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is Cam Akers is ready to go training camp week 1 next year, right? Like, that's best case scenario for Cam Akers. Is he going to be the full-fledged starter right away? Like, absolutely.
Or is he Marlon Mack?
Full season of Henderson carrying primarily the primary running back job. They're probably going to go to a committee of some degree, right? So there's no way that they're just going to go, oh yeah, Cam Akers is back, he's our starter, and he's going to be an 85% opportunity workhorse after an Achilles tear. No, like, it's going to be a rough situation, at least for the next year, 2 years for Cam Akers at best. The only way, in my opinion, that Cam Akers ever gets back to the potential that we wanted to see from him is if he just defies all odds, overcomes the Achilles tear and beats Darrell Henderson out during the 2022 season and becomes a starter then. And again, that's maybe a 2% chance of happening.
And are we still ruling out the fact that the Rams a top 5 to 7 team in the NFL, we would say, in terms of Super Bowl contender? What if they lose in like the NFC Championship this year? They realize, oh shoot, Cam Akers may not come back the same. Darrell Henderson didn't do the job for us when we needed him. What if they go out and draft an Isaiah Spiller in the second round next year?
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Like, we can't rule out anything from this
There's
situation.
a lot of free agent running backs this offseason too that are going to be good.
Yeah. So, anyways, this is just I'm still trying to recover.
It's a very bleak outlook. I know this is probably not the excitement you guys are used to hearing from us. We're usually very passionate, very loud, and very, excited about fantasy football, but this is an unfortunate reality of fantasy football. Sometimes injuries happen. You pray that they're not these injuries. Like, this is the literal worst case scenario. One of our favorite guys tore his Achilles at running back. Like, this is the worst case scenario for an injury to an NFL player that we really like. So we're definitely not feeling too good today. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys got some information. If you guys are Cam Akers owners, if you guys are Darrell Henderson owners, I hope you took away some information from that. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe, like, and comment any of your thoughts down below. As we talked about yesterday, I have a contest running. We're picking my league punishment. So if you have any league punishment ideas, put them in down below in the comments. I got some good ideas yesterday. And if we end up picking your league idea or your league punishment idea for my league, you will win a free draft guide and a guaranteed spot into our listener league. Danny has something to say, clearly, so I'll let him go.
All I'm going to say is, let's just hope my knee isn't as bad as Cam Akers' Achilles, because I may or may not have torn my MCL, so fingers crossed on that. But anyways, I don't know why I added that in. I just wanted to make it a personal experience. As always, you guys know how I am. Anyways, rip Cam Akers. Hopefully he recovers fine. Peace out, y'all.
Why you need the money?